Hello there, hi, how are you? It's me, your resident fish expert, here with a special little video today. Have you heard of a very small little game by the name of Subnautica? You have? Subnautica is a series of currently two games where you crash land in the ocean of an alien planet and have to survive. Both games are full of a variety of strange little creatures that are either terrified of you or desperately want to kill you. Today, I'm going to go through a list of a few of these creatures from the first game, determine certain characteristics about them, and compare them to real life fish. I'm only going to do one fish per biome, but don't worry, there are a lot of biomes. I'm also going to attempt to rank them based on how realistic they are, but I am expecting to put them on S tier because, well, the designers knew what they were doing. The Peeper. A classic Subnautica staple. Man, I absolutely hate this thing with every fiber of my being. Look at its eye to head ratio. Why does it live on the surface? What is it trying to see up here? It doesn't need to take in that much light. In all seriousness, the Peeper's eye is comically large in comparison to the rest of its body, and yes, I know that is quite literally the point of it. But typically, sea life with such large eyes are operating in a low light environment, which the Peeper absolutely does not live in. You could make the argument that its eye size is to compensate for nighttime, but if that was the case, then why does it swim around during the day? At any rate, this poor little creature is being 24/7 flashbanged by the sun, or whatever the star on planet 4546b orbits is called. Scanning the Peeper reveals a few things about its biology. Its eyes allow it to discern colors in a variety of different lighting conditions. Its fins are powerful enough to let it leap meters into the air. It has a beak to break down coral/tough vegetation. It can expel its stomach contents on demand, for some reason. And it is just as well suited to survive deeper waters, go figure. Peepers hold a lot in common with mainly deep ocean fish due to their eye size. They also hold similarities with other fish due to their beaks. For the most part, the Peeper is realistic, but as punishment for its eye issue, it's going into C tier. These bad boys are long, purple, and kinda mean. They typically chase after their prey with relative relentlessness. Fun fact, these little freaks are one of two creatures in the whole game that do not bioluminesce. The game tells us that stalkers have very sharp teeth, have a form of night vision, have 7 dorsal fins/ridges, and have long and powerful pelvic fins. We also learn that stalkers shed their teeth often, typically by chewing on metals. Stalkers appear to take on traits from both sharks and dolphins. They are carnivorous, and their main body holds a similar build to that of a shark, which might suggest they have a cartilaginous skeleton. They also never stop growing teeth, much like sharks. Unlike sharks, however, they have a dolphin-like tail fin where it is positioned horizontally instead of vertically. Due to overall having body parts that make relatively perfect sense to go together, the stalker gets an S on realism. These little buggers are wacky little ambush predators that dig in the sand in order to jump scare you and feast on your frightened remains. The PDA tells us that sand sharks have a dorsal fin towards its front, presumably to shift around sand, have a hard exoskeleton that limits its maneuverability, and have 12 little feetsies that are used to help dig around in the sand. They also have many rows of teeth, like a shark, that go way too far down their throat. The sand sharks hold few similarities with sharks, go figure, with the many rows of teeth being the main comparison. However, their exoskeleton highly suggests that they are arthropods. They behave similarly to stargazer fish and bobbit worms with the whole shoot out of the sand to attack prey gimmick. In terms of realism, though, these guys are lacking. They are ambush predators that seem to live in relatively barren environments, and to top it off, they can't chase prey very well either. They have a terminal mouth, meaning that their mouth is in the middle of their face, so unlike the stargazer fish, where the mouth is angled upward, it can't immediately get its mouth around their prey. Due to the fact that they wouldn't reliably have a source of food, the sand shark gets put into C tier. These things spend most of their time just swimming in circles for fun. I don't even think they can eat. The PDA provides just about as much information about the jelly ray's behavior as we can see with our own eyes. It's bioluminescent, and that's it. I guess it also says that they're inedible, which could mean they're poisonous. The Subnautica wiki suggests that they eat organic waste that falls on the seabed, but with no signs of a mouth of any kind, it's not clear how it would do so. Obviously, these are a combination of jellyfish and manta rays. They're mainly shaped and move like manta rays, but the whole potential poisonous aspect and overall appearance of the jelly ray gives it its jellyfish traits. While nice to look at, the jelly rays do not have much for them on the realism scale, as they just float around until they presumably die. For that, jelly rays will achieve a D tier. God, I love the Oculus. Its eye makes perfect sense for the size of its head, seeing as how it lives in a dark environment. The game further explains their superiority in design to their cousins. Complex eyeballs for night vision, which causes a phobia of light as it would take in too much light. No beak, as it feeds on soft corals and lost the need for one. Separated tail fins that, while making the Oculus slower, can detach and regrow, so losing one to a predator is not a big deal. Like the peeper, the Oculus holds similar traits to deep ocean fish due to their eye size, but since they do not have a beak, their mouth is most similar to your typical home aquarium fish. Due to overall having an existence that makes sense, although the tail adaptation is a bit odd, the Oculus gets our first A-tier spot. Reginald is another cousin of the peeper, albeit a distant one. They have clearly adapted to be quick, probably because it helps to avoid being eaten. Our PDA tells us that Reginald is dull green for camouflage, yet has a bioluminescent tail for mating purposes, and they feed by filtering algae through their gill-like mouths. We also learn that they are very high in calories. Aside from camouflaging like many prey fish species, the Reginald doesn't have a lot in common with real-life fish. Its feeding habits are plausible, but its attempts at camouflage are ruined by its bioluminescent tail, which would stick out like a sore thumb. Due to the fact that it overall makes sense, but has two conflicting adaptations, Reginald will have to go into B tier. Gasopods are probably the least fish-looking fish in this whole game. They clearly are designed to look as though they're wearing a gas mask, which fits with how they function thematically. Scanning a gasopod reveals that they produce a noxious gas/poison from their tail. They have thick skin and many gill layers to protect themselves from their own poison, and they have large, powerful pelvic fins. We also can read that they are social in nature with other gasopods. Appearance-wise, they don't have any clear connections with any real-life fish, although their whole poison-based form of protection is very similar to that of a pufferfish. It is difficult to pinpoint whether it is more accurate to say this fish is poisonous or venomous, as it releases a toxin semi-passively. As its existence is only slightly confusing, the gasopod will get an A tier on the realism scale. Oh hey, it's the second most terrifying part of Subnautica! Coming in at 55 meters in length, this thing is 180 feet worth of reasons to never go into the ocean ever. We're informed that the Reaper Leviathan has a few special traits. Mandibles to grab and pull and prey, a loud roar that functions as echolocation and sonar, it likes to attack from behind, and it is, quote, almost all muscle, very little brain, no sense of morality, just muscle, synapses, and teeth. It notably has a large horn which is presumably used to ram into prey. The Reaper Leviathan does not have many clear connections to a specific real-life fish. The largest Earth sea life are blue whales, which reach up to 98 feet in length, which is only slightly above half the length of a Reaper Leviathan. Reapers do have a very anguilliform, eel-shaped body, but unlike eels, it has pectoral and caudal tail fins. Realistically, the Reaper would need to spend most of its time not moving to conserve energy, as it is very, very large and would need a lot of food in order to fuel its body. If it were significantly smaller, it would definitely be a plausible fish, but due to the fact that it's just too large and moves around way too much, it's going into C tier. These tubes of electrified meat make me cry myself to sleep. Any attempt to pet them results in your heart being blessed by 44,000 volts. So, our PDA tells us that they have prongs that produce electricity in order to incapacitate prey, and have large, flexible jaws with many sharp teeth. The main function of the amp eel is clearly based upon the electric eel. Electric eels stun their prey by being able to deliver a shock of roughly 860 volts. For reference, a US power outlet produces 120 volts. Based on the appearance of the amp eel, the electric currents it produces should be very powerful, but based on the fact that you can swim away safely after being shocked, the amp eel only produces at most 50 volts of electricity, which, while painful, are low risk to the human body. Well, either that or Riley is just made out of rubber. Amp eels are very tube-like and don't really have a tail, and don't even have fins, so I really don't have much of a clue of how this thing moves. Due to that, and the fact that this thing just produces a straight-up exposed electrical current, I'm gonna have to put these guys into D tier. Boomerangs. We are informed by the PDA that boomerangs are herbivores, have sharp teeth despite eating corals, and have twin cartilaginous fins. The fins being cartilaginous is described in a weird way, somewhat implying that the rest of the skeleton is made of bone. Regardless, the boomerang being made of cartilage would make it completely unusable as an actual boomerang. While an herbivore having sharp teeth isn't unheard of, most fish that eat corals have some form of beak to properly break down the coral into digestible pieces. If the boomerang were real, it would probably rely on either soft marine plants or just being a carnivore to survive. Due to the fact that the boomerang probably could exist but needs a different diet, it's going into B tier. Biters are comically aggressive, like cartoon piranha levels of uncontrollable rage. Typically, they hunt down your poor soul in packs. Our little PDA friend tells us that biters have an olfactory antenna used for detecting bodily fluids, have an additional pair of eyes for improved peripheral vision, and have an overdeveloped tail fin in order to outpace prey. Based on some of its characteristics and colorization, I personally have reason to believe that they are, if not a baby reaper leviathan, in some way related to the reapers. Biters look similar to anglerfish with the razor-sharp teeth and weird full lowy bulb antenna thing they have going on, but behaviorally, they do act like piranhas by their ravenous nature and the way they attack in groups. While the nose antenna is a bit odd, nothing about this creature really makes it implausible, so for that, the biter gets her second S tier. This dude looks like he's been cursed with some knowledge that he by all means should not be able to comprehend. The game tells us that they have large eyes for higher light sensitivity in darker places, and have a thick exoskeleton to protect from predators, but more likely to protect from their own species. The PDA refers to them as slow and unresponsive as a means of conserving energy, but that has not been my experience. The bone shark holds a somewhat similar appearance to a shark, but oddly enough it is just kind of its own thing. It has a horizontal tail like a dolphin's tail, and we can see that it only has one row of teeth that is just part of its exoskeleton. I guess it isn't impossible for this creature to live, though it being that large, fast, but having a thick exoskeleton anyways makes me question if it could feasibly exist. C tier. The mesmer are very beautiful fish that you should under every circumstance approach with your guard let down. The PDA informs us that their wings are capable of reflecting light in a matter that fills the victim's brain with messages to lure them closer, and they can open their shell in order to, quote, share its beauty. Do not resist. When they actually open their shell, it is to impale the victim with spiked tentacles, so, maybe don't actually go closer. The design of the mesmer itself doesn't really have many similarities to any actual fish, but its behaviors are actually used in some marine life. Many fish have distracting patterns to confuse other fish, though it is typically so that they could distract predators. The method of changing colors to capture prey is used by one sea creature, however, and that is none other than the cuttlefish. Typically, cuttlefish will rapidly change color to confuse their prey while slowly moving closer. Then, once they're close enough, they launch out their tentacles to restrain and consume their next meal. The mesmer's strategy may be real to an extent, however, due to the fact that it subliminally implants, quote, enticing messages interpreted in whatever form is most convincing by the target, end quote, into its victim's brain, the mesmer is going into D tier. Personally, the crab squid are the most upsetting thing to look at in this game. I really do not know what it is about them, but I feel the same way looking at them as I would like a biblically accurate angel. The PDA informs us that they have 10 limbs for swimming, walking, hunting, and potential tool use. They attack anything that produces light. Oh, how could I forget? They can also produce an EMP blast, which can shut off your oxygen supply. That's right. Somehow, these nightmare creatures can produce an electromagnetic pulse specifically to ruin you and your submarine crewmates' days. The crab squid are obviously a combination of crabs and squids, although the transparent sac over top of their heads are somewhat similar in appearance to comb jellies. In terms of the squid-like characteristics, there really aren't any outside the fact that its head is actually its stomach. The limbs of the crab squid appear to be reminiscent of the legs of a Japanese spider crab, with all their limbs being the longest parts of their bodies. Its physical biology doesn't seem to make complete sense, with it being a weird spider, crab, jellyfish, squid combo, but I guess it technically isn't impossible. They're very large for presumably being an arthropod, though. The odd body parts and the fact that they can produce an EMP blast will only land them in D tier on a realism scale. While they may have the dopest name in the entire game, the Bloodcrawler really is nothing special. Sure, they may be taller than the average person, and they might have a very upsetting eyeball placement, but all in all, other creatures do that but more upsetting anyways. The PDA informs us that blood crawlers have legs that are at least a meter in length, although they are definitely over 2 meters, and they eat carrion and scavenge for food. Their legs are mentioned to be able to allow it to move shockingly quickly and give it the ability to climb walls. Blood crawlers appear to take inspiration from Japanese spider crabs as well, although they have remarkably less limbs. For being scavengers, blood crawlers are oddly tall, especially considering that they don't have any arms to pick up food. While simply lowering their torso works to access food, most marine scavengers are lower down to the ground, which allows for easier access to whatever corpse they choose to feed on. While the creature itself is plausible, I'm simply going to have to barely put it into B tier as it doesn't have very good adaptations for its lifestyle. The sea treaders are another type of large, arthropod-like creature that are technically bipedal. Our PDA tells us that their antennae are used to detect scents, they have a thick exoskeleton, their front leg is actually an elongated snout used to pick up plant matter off the seafloor, and they travel in herds to areas with high amounts of flora to eat. Their leg-snout thing is used as a means of maintaining balance. This is probably the first truly alien creature in Subnautica. Aside from having an exoskeleton, there really aren't any animals to relate this to. All I can really come up with is the long-extinct Tully monstrum due to it having an elongated snout. The sea treader's size does put its possibility into question, but due to the fact that I genuinely do not know what to say, it gets a pass. The river prowler is literally just an eel. Yeah, it has its little tendrils that it can attack things with, but really its big thing is that it's an eel. Our PDA tells us that they have strong jaws that they can attack with, have an eel-like body, and have strong jaws that they attack with. They do try to make sure their jaws are always pointing at their opponent, at least. Okay, so outside of just being an eel, it does have one other thing going for it, and that's the fact that they're transparent. Many deep-sea fish have developed transparent skin in order to better hide in dark environments. The river prowler itself isn't very sneaky, but it would be very hard to spot in its environment if it just sat still. For the most part, I'd say it's realistic, but I'm giving it an A tier instead of an S tier because the only visible internal structures that we see are the bones, with no signs of any actual organs. Crimson rays are very large manta ray-esque creatures that live in the inactive lava zone, aka probably a very hot place. The game tells us that these rays have thick scales to survive the hot temperatures, have forward-facing eyes, which suggests they were once predatory. The PDA never tells us what they eat, but based on the fact that they are no longer predatory, I'm going to assume that means they are now herbivores, which is still odd as there are barely any plants where they're found. I mean, it's just a red manta ray. I don't know what to point out other than the fact that it has counter shading, which means that as a form of camouflage, a sea creature would have darker colors on the upper portion of its body while the lower portion has lighter colors. It's most effective with shades of blue in the open ocean. The entire inactive lava zone is pretty much just red and brown, so I don't exactly know how helpful the counter shading is in this area in specific, but ironically, it may actually be more helpful for it if it were to live on Earth. Since they live very deep in the ocean, most creatures around them would already be red, as red is practically invisible in the light spectrum in the deepest parts of the sea. While their yellow underside might not be the most helpful here, it could potentially simulate light from above instead of an actual creature. Due to the fact that the Crimson Ray would probably be better off on Earth, I'm gonna put it into S tier. Sea Dragon Leviathans are probably the coolest creatures in Subnautica, but I'm just gonna outright say it, there's no way these things could exist. At the very least, due to their ability to breathe fire underwater. D tier. The PDA informs us that the Sea Dragon Leviathans have heat-proof tissue, have actual arms, and to an extent hands for movement and attacking, and are the largest carnivorous species on the planet. There is evidence in-game that the Sea Dragon Leviathans might leave the caves and hunt elsewhere, as, well, not much lives in the volcanic region that they live. They are very reptilian in nature, giving major dinosaur vibes, specifically the Mosasaurus. Outside of their arms, they appear to move via the tentacles that trail behind their torso. Due to the shape of the tentacles, I'm inclined to say that they're based off of the longer tentacles of the squid, so they may also be used to grab things. They have large jaws that are sort of crocodilian in nature. Oh yeah, and as stated previously, they can breathe fire, and due to the fact that dragons are yet to be proven to exist, that really damages their realism. So it's a... let me check really quick. 112 meter, or 367 foot long crocodile dragon squid. Remember, the blue whale is usually about 98 feet long. The Sea Dragon Leviathan is as long as a 26-story building is tall. Yeah, it's staying in D tier. Well, that's the last of the biomes in this game. There are no other biomes here. Nope. I have nowhere else to go. Nowhere else at all. Fine. Oh hey, it's the most terrifying part of Subnautica!
Warning, entering ecological dead zone. Adding report to databank.
The adult ghost leviathans are almost exclusively found along the outer edges of the map, presumably because they are so large that they couldn't feasibly live elsewhere. While not quite as large as the Sea Dragon Leviathans, their speed and methods of attack require an open area. We are told by the PDA that ghost leviathans have a cartilaginous hammerhead for ramming into things, have jaws capable of ripping through the flesh of any creature, have very muscular interiors with a translucent membrane, and they most likely migrate. Despite being able to brutally massacre almost anything, the PDA points out that ghost leviathans actually mainly eat microscopic organisms out in the open ocean, so on the plus side, you're only being attacked for invading their personal space, and not because you look like you taste good. Ghost leviathans have many deep sea adaptations, such as bioluminescent, transparency, and, being fast. Like the PDA stated, they have a hammerhead for ramming into things. Their body is also incredibly eel-like. I think if it were much smaller than 107 meters, it could potentially exist, though due to having no fins, it likely would not be nearly that fast. I'm gonna have to put the Ghost Leviathan in C tier.
Well, that about does it. If I had more time to work on this, I'd probably do every fish in the game, but as this is a school project with a school project deadline, I have to stop it here. Speaking of school projects, this is actually going to be my last school project, as I'm going to be graduating shortly after this is made. I'll cut you a deal, though. 52 million likes by September 4th, 2054, and maybe I'll make a part 2. And 1 for below 02. Well, that's about it. See ya.